Welcome back, guys. We are very fortunate this week. We have an incredible guest, very, very inspiring. He is a former firefighter turned youth minister turned multi-millionaire real estate investor. He's done a TED Talk where he explains that money can indeed buy you happiness, and he is the founder of the Thrive Convention. Please welcome Mr. Cole Hatter. How you doing today, Cole?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Of course, I'm excited too. We did a panel up on for elevator nights.
Yep.
It's really interesting because I'm gonna skip around here. Dan is a common thread for a lot of the guests that I have. I think Dan Fleyshman, I try to teach in my networking program what Dan does.
Sure.
He's one of the people that I model a lot of stuff after. Can you talk about, he almost seems like the center of this wheel that we're all kind of spokes of, or he's your favorite influencer's favorite influencer.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know. I think then there's a lot to learn from this, but Dan has put himself in the center of every single person's circle. The way he's done it, I believe, is through elevator. I've built a pretty impressive network, and it was through Thrive that you just mentioned in my intro. And so something for the listeners to think about is producing your own event is the fastest way to build your brand and to build your network. Yeah. And so because Dan's now done, I think we were on his 50th elevator that one night. I don't know if he's done more since, but he's 50-something free events where he has 2,000 to 5,000 people show up to each one, puts him in the center of everybody's circle, and then he's like a super connector. He can see what you're doing, what I'm doing, and then he knows, hey, Cole and Mike, these guys need to do a podcast together and meet each other, and he's just really, really good about that.
100% stole that from Dan, the connector idea. Finding the guy with the DUIs with the DUI lawyer, right? The guy with the leaky roof with the roofer, right? That kind of stuff. And then for me, for elevator nights, I literally walked in one day and he looks at me, goes, just come up here. And then he just put me on a panel. That's how it was.
Was that the night that I met you?
No. That's the third one I've done, the one I met you at.
Yeah.
So I've been doing them since then. And then he does these dinners where I'm sitting at a dinner and like everybody's got like t-shirts and jeans on, and then I just see Patek watches and fucking Bentley trucks outside, and I'm like, holy shit, man.
Right.
It's like everybody you talk to, they're like they're talking about their dogs, and they just did $600 million in revenue this year.
Yep.
Like and then he makes half the table stand up and then switch tables so that everyone gets to meet everyone in that room. I got like 4 or 5 new podcast guests just from going to dinner with Dan. I mean, he is like the ultimate connector. This podcast is about evolutionary psychology, and we talk about it's almost like what the term is. Networking is an evolutionary adaptation, meaning Homo sapiens were developed. We were created cities and tribes and all these things because unlike other animals, we actually work in tandem as in teamwork. We work in teams in order to raise our young and in order to protect our societies. So it's
tribal.
Very, very tribal, very tribal. So can we talk about this? Man, there's so many different places I want to go. So the idea, your origin story, which is really fascinating, the idea that you started off, you get out of college, you decide you want to be a firefighter.
Sure.
That whole thing happened with the car accident and how that whole thing changed your life.
Yeah, I actually wanted to be a firefighter even earlier. I was probably about 13 years old is when you start thinking, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I knew I wanted to help people. And so I was just looking into career. I thought about joining the military like you did. By the way, thank you again for your service. Appreciate you, brother. I thought about being a doctor, but 100 years of school intimidated me.
Yes.
I thought about being a police officer, but I had had some trouble with the law, so I thought maybe that wasn't the best fit. So as I evaluated these careers, being a firefighter where I had the opportunity to play with fire, save lives, and get paid for it just made a lot of sense. And so I started preparing for that career early. When I was in high school, I joined a college to take night and weekend classes to do all my prerequisites so that when I graduated high school and all my buddies who also wanted to be firefighters were just beginning, I was 3.5 years ahead of them. And I had done everything I needed to do. So as soon as I graduated high school, I did my fire academy and started working with the department at just 19 years old. I had my whole life figured out, bro. I had a salary, benefits. I knew that I'd put in my 30, maybe 35 years for retirement plus. I'd be done in my early 50s and just chilling. And then that was my career, and it was everything I'd hoped for. There was some politics that you didn't know about ahead of time, but it is what it is. 2 years into that career, I got in that car accident that you just mentioned, and I was actually on my way out here to Vegas. I live in Orange County, California. A couple of buddies and I hopped in the car, take that 3.5, 4 hour drive out to Vegas, and we got in a rollover car accident where I was ejected from the car going about 80, right? Speed limit's 75 out there. And I was so injured that they actually had to close the 15 freeway in both directions, land a helicopter on the freeway, put me in it, and life flight me back to Southern California for a trauma center where there was a surgeon waiting for me, and they were able to put me back together and save my life. I had a traumatic brain injury. I had all kinds of injuries that then eventually ended my firefighting career. And then that's what made me have to pivot. I was so banged up after that accident, I had to move back in with my parents. I was now 21 years old, so I'd had 2 years of my freedom and independence of having an income and a career back on the couch at mom and dad's house, and had to heal. It took me about a year to learn how to walk again. I was blind in one eye from my injury. And just, we didn't know what my recovery would be. Praise God, I've had 100% recovery, but that year was grim, and that's when I started my first business.
But the other thing that I just thought was just mind-blowing was that it was 60 days later that you lost your other best friend who was in the same car.
Yeah.
That's just like incredible. I don't know if you can tell that story.
Yeah, so there were three of us. We were best buds. It was me, Steve, and Matt. And on the car accident, the first accident, Steve was driving. Matt was in the front right passenger seat, and I was in the back seat. Steve and I were both ejected from that car, so I didn't mention that. And we were both flown back in the helicopter. I don't remember any of it, by the way. The only way I even know what happened is through the eyewitness reports and the police report that I read through, and then just, my mom and dad at the hospital telling me what happened while I was passed out. But Steve ended up passing in that accident. And he was a best friend. He was like a brother to me. We grew up together. And so that was really hard let me just back up. To lose your best friend sucks. Nobody wants to lose their best friend. But in this instance, I was in the accident with him.
Yeah.
I was ejected with him. I was in the helicopter being flown back to a hospital with him, and I was in the operating room right next to him. He had his surgical team, I had mine, and they were working on both of us. I survived, he didn't. So not only did I have the grief of losing a best bud, but I had soul-crushing guilt that I had made it and he didn't. And the only other person that understood that guilt was the other passenger, Matt, who was our other third best friend. We were like the three amigos. We all worked together at a restaurant. Like, we were inseparable. And so Matt and I really leaned in on each other because we just needed to be there to heal and to get through this. And so Matt came and visited me at my parents' house. He did not get ejected, so he ended up getting some stitches and had a concussion, but he was nowhere near as banged up as I was. So when I was now, a month later at my parents' house, Matt was coming and visiting me and bringing me food and just trying to pull me out of my depression. And at about the 60-day mark, I had gotten out of a wheelchair and I was now on crutches and very barely moving around. And he was like, "Bro, let's go ride dirt bikes." I was like, "Are you freaking crazy?" He's like, "Dude, you sit on dirt bikes. Like, you can sit in a wheelchair, you can sit on a dirt bike, let's go." And convinced our parents to allow it because they saw me sliding into this just, grief-stricken depression where I needed to do something in my old routine again. We ended up packing up the dirt bikes, going out to the desert, and very long story short, on our final ride back to the car, we were just putting around, going very slow. I was in no position to hit whoops or do jumps or any of that. It was just putting around out in the desert. We had decided to pack up, go home. Matt was first and I was behind him, and he ends up climbing this incline, like any incline in the desert, right? Doesn't look any different. It's covered with the tumbleweed type vegetation, whatever that plant is. And Matt starts climbing to the top and disappears across the top because you can't see what's on the top of a hill. As I'm climbing the hill behind him and I get to the top, there isn't a top. It's a huge hole. It's like a massive anthill or like a volcano, if you would. It's just a huge hole, and I fell into it. And as I was falling into the hole, I was able to grab a bush, no bigger than a basketball, and just hang there by one arm, looking down into complete darkness. And I was able to wiggle myself out, get to my armpits, climb out, and then start looking for Matt because I didn't want to believe that he had fallen in the hole. And so I'm yelling and I'm looking in the desert and I'm listening for his exhaust on his bike. I can't hear it. So finally I was like, dude, he must have fallen in. This thing could be 30 feet deep. He could be down there bleeding, have a broken leg. He could be unconscious. So I called 911, went back to the freeway, linked up with the rescue team, took them back to the hole. It took them 6.5 hours to finally get to where Matt was. And they weren't giving us much information, the search and rescue team, and because there was a lot of commotion. The news vans were out there now. It was a bunch of spectators, and so they put up the caution tape. They pushed us back. And finally, 6 hours later, the chaplain says, "I need to speak to the family." So it's Steve's mom and dad, who I had just lost 66 days earlier. It's Matt's mom and dad. It's my mom and dad and my youth pastor, Brian. And this chaplain that worked for the sheriff's department pulled us aside and said, "This is an abandoned mine shaft. What this hole is this company came in, dug out all the silver, all the gold, and just left the hole behind once all the minerals were extracted." And he said that the reason it took so long to get to Matt was this was the biggest mine shaft he'd ever seen. It was 780 feet deep. Matt fell all the way to the bottom, and he didn't survive. And so that was 66 days after Matt and I were in an accident with Steve that he didn't survive. So now in a 66-day period, I've lost the two most important people to me at 21 years old, other than my blood relatives. These are the two most important people to me. And I lost both of them in accidents that I was in. And so, bro, I didn't go the military route, and I certainly am not trying to take any of their credibility or honor. But to be in an accident several times and be the only survivor, military guys seem to understand that because they've gone into battle and come out with brothers right at their left and right at their right that don't make it. And so it was just this really ugly season in my life where I had now lost the two most important people to me, and at the same time was completely grief-stricken and just broken. And, made some stupid choices right there afterwards. I don't mind sharing this. Immediately after the car accident, I was prescribed morphine pills.
Yeah.
Because I was torn apart. I mean, I looked like a burn victim. When you hit the pavement at 80 miles an hour, you don't keep a lot of skin. And so I'm on morphine pills, and I took them until the pain went away. But I still had probably like 60 pills left, even though I wasn't taking them anymore, that I just threw in a cabinet. Well, now that I had lost Matt, I realized that if I took 1 or 2 morphines and drank straight hard alcohol right after it, I would fall asleep at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't wake up until like 11 o'clock the next day. I wasn't suicidal. I wasn't trying to overdose.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be alive. And by medicating myself in this way, it was definitely eliminating as much of the pain. I mean, I just wasn't awake. I slept from 4 p.m. to 11 a.m. every single day. I did that for about 30 days and then had my aha moment where I realized I can't do anything to bring Steve back. I can't do anything to bring Matt back. I don't know why I was given more time, but I can do something with that. And by sitting around taking pills and drinking alcohol and feeling sorry for myself was no way to honor their lives. And so I decided to motivate myself instead of kill myself, because that's the direction I was going. I would have eventually accidentally overdosed. And I then decided to completely change my life for them. And that was the beginning of my comeback and the beginning of my journey, I guess.
You have several, very inspirational parts of your story. We've had some guys in here. I had Nick Santonastasso on here. One of the reasons why I don't know if you've interviewed Nick before or talked to Nick. He was born with...
He's spoken at my event a couple of times. We're buddies.
Like, one of the reasons why I love Nick is, obviously you're a performance coach. I'm a performance coach. The idea that when you have a client who has excuses, and then they see Nick, he destroys those excuses, right?
Totally.
And the situation, I lost my dad to a drunk driver in 2006.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And then your situation, I couldn't even believe when I was listening to your story about losing your 2 best friends 60 days apart like that. And then afterwards, we can go into this. I had a situation where I was triple long during the Corona crash, and I lost almost everything during there. And I can talk about it now because I've made almost all of it back. But like at the time, it was so soul crushing at the time. When I look back on it now, the lessons that I learned. Now, you talk about after this point, when you get off the pills and alcohol, you become a real estate investor in 2005, and you go through another traumatic experience.
Which one?
Well, what happens in 2008?
The recession. My 20s and early 30s, I've lost a lot. I've been blessed more than most, and everyone's like, you need to write a book or a movie or something. But so after Steve and Matt decided to become a real estate investor, this was the year that I was recovering. You can't be a firefighter from a wheelchair. And as I've said, I fully recovered. But in that recovery, I ended up starting a real estate investment business, and I made my dad my business partner. And the whole reason I went into real estate was it's just the one thing I saw a bunch of rich people doing.
Sure.
It didn't matter if they were a plastic surgeon. They bought the building that their office operated out of and owned rental properties. And so I was like, dang, either people make their money in real estate or they stick their money in real estate. That's the only common thing I can see which rich people do. So I'm going to go do real estate.
Yeah.
So here I was almost 20. Actually, I just turned 22. So I was 21 during the accident, turned 22, got my real estate license, and thought I would just be the next, star realtor, and realized that I didn't want to chase commissions. I wanted to earn profits instead. So switched very quickly from being a realtor to an investor. Had no money, no idea what I was doing. But there was a guy at our church who committed to splitting deals with me. If I found the deals and did all the work, he would pay for all of the expenses, and we would split the profits 50-50, which is the most expensive interest rate you've ever heard of in your life. But I figured, bro, better to get 50% of something than 100% of nothing, right?
Yeah.
So I took 50% of the deals, and that was the beginning of my career. Started off in 2005, and real estate was absolutely booming. Interest rates were dropping. They were printing money at the Fed, and just the economy was hot. And so I couldn't lose. I would, in some cases, I would buy a house, and while we were waiting on our permits to start the renovation to then renovate it and flip it, I would get another offer that was big enough that it's what I was anticipating making anyway. So it's like, okay, I'm going to sell it at a discount, but by the time you include my carrying costs and all my renovation costs, this is all I would have made anyway.
Yeah.
So I was buying houses, like counting to 10 and selling them for a profit. It was easy. And I was 22, 23, 24, making, probably for me personally, $300,000-$500,000 a year, because my dad was my partner. We were probably bringing in about $1 million and splitting it.
Yeah.
And at 23 years old, what do you do with $500,000 a year of income?
Not smart things.
Yeah, you buy an Escalade, you buy a boat, you do all the stupid stuff that I did. And I learned about leverage, and I learned that you would be an idiot to pay cash for a car. You should go and finance this, and you should finance your boat, and you should finance. And so I financed a lifestyle that you needed $500,000 a year to live in. And then 2008 came, and the recession came, and real estate imploded, and I was an absolute idiot, and was $50,000+ a month in my overhead on all garbage, because I was this young kid who had no financial literacy. and learned the hard way what that's like. So I had to fire sale things. I had to pay somebody $10,000 to take over my lease on my Escalade. I had to sell my boat for a loss. I had to do all this stupid stuff. And I almost got through it unscathed. I lost one property to foreclosure in 2009. I was fire selling everything I had and just trying to get rid of my overhead. And again, I almost got through it. That was a long time ago. Obviously, my credit and everything's recovered by now. But that was it. So 2008 came, completely destroyed me. And I was too stupid to quit. So I stuck through it all the way till 2010, just hemorrhaging. I mean, I'm used to buying a house, renovating it, and taking it to sale, and at the title agency getting a check. Now I would have to go to the closing table and write a check because I'm literally selling it for less than I'm into it for. And did that for a few years until finally I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I told my pops, hey, dude, I'm going to let you have my half of the business. I got to figure things out. Unrelated, I had a girlfriend who dumped me on Cinco de Mayo, which is so un-American to dump me on a Mexican holiday, right? I thought I was going to drink tequila and eat tacos and party.
Celebrate the Battle of Puebla.
Yeah, and she freaking dumps me on Cinco de Mayo. And so here I am. My business is failing. My girlfriend's left me, right? And it's
Yo, man, I just realized I got broken up with on Cinco de Mayo. I just realized that right now. I didn't even think about it till right. I was in Mexico, too, when it happened. Anyway,
that's even, dude, we should start like a men's recovery group.
That's so crazy.
But so, yeah, wait, what was the year?
It was 2021.
Oh, okay.
Was it? Yeah, 2021, yeah.
All right, mine was 2010.
Yeah.
How crazy would it have been if this was the same day?
Yeah, it's funny.
But so anyway, so she dumps me, and so I had no business, I had no girlfriend, and I just went back to my roots and wanted to help people. So what do you do when your business is failing and your girlfriend dumps you? Become a missionary, right?
Yeah.
Of course. Isn't that what everyone does? So I moved down to Mexico and I joined an organization called YWAM. That's an acronym for Youth with a Mission. And I started building houses for homeless families and did the missionary thing, bro.
That part was awesome. One thing I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
You and I have experienced this a lot where, we go to some of these conferences, and so you traded through the crash of 2008, meaning you were buying and selling assets. I was in the stock market back then. And when you meet some kids that are trading crypto now, and they're in their mid-20s or early 20s, and they don't believe things can go down.
Oh, totally.
But you are old enough, you forget they're literally not old enough to remember the crash of 2008, or they watched one movie with Brad Pitt about it, right?
Yep, exactly.
And they
Big Short.
And they think they get it. Have you experienced that before? They just think they don't realize that this can go the other way.
Yeah, they're bullish investors that have only experienced a bull run.
Correct.
And I see that in entrepreneurship too. People that started their business from like 2011 and on don't know what it's like to be short on payroll. They have no idea what it's like to care deeply for your employees and know that you can no longer afford to keep them there and that you have to contract a bit. And so, there's a lot of people that live in this puppy dog and lollipops, unicorn and rainbow world because they got started, 2011 or later. And it never is it easy. And I got to give people credit if you have at least the courage to try, sure. But they had an unrealistic expectation of what any challenges would be like. And again, we're talking about investing in assets. Capital markets was easy to raise money. There was liquidity everywhere. And I would have people lining up to fund my deals in real estate. I'd have 6 or 7 lenders that would want to give me money for the same deal. And so it was just such an easy market. And so, for any of your listeners that are in that world, 2023 should be a big wake-up call.
Well, it's not just that. It's like when the crash of crypto happened, it was because of some conspiracy. And it's not, it could not have been because of market correction. It was because of who the president was or because of this or that. Yeah. And because they had never gone through the crash of 2008, they didn't understand that people get levered and then all of a sudden there's a crash. You tell them this and they just did not believe it. It was really interesting, the cognitive bias that I saw, when most recent, when Bitcoin was from 60K down to 18.
The optimism bias.
Yeah, it was just one of these things where it's no, obviously it's because the matrix is attacking us. No, that's not why it is, bro. Yeah. It's just some of these assets were overvalued. Anyway, going back to what you were saying, 2010, you become a missionary.
Yep.
And then your life changes there again. Can you go into that?
Yeah. So I'm down there, and my role is to be a construction worker. Essentially, the nonprofit that I joined had a program where youth groups from all around the world, or gentlemen like yourself, whoever wants to give back, they would buy a house, and so they would, I don't even know what it cost to build one of those houses at the time. I know now. But down then, they would buy a house and they would bring a team of 15, 20 people down, and they would have no idea how to build this house, but it would be like a missions trip that their church would put on or something like that. They would land in San Diego airport, and your boy would pick them up at the airport in a bunch of vans or buses, take them down to where our base was, which was a repurposed hotel. This nonprofit bought a hotel and turned it into like a hostel, I guess, for missionaries. And we would go out and we would spend 2 days, and in 2.5 days, we would build a 16 by 20 foot home, and it was all prefabbed. Everything was pre-measured. It was the same template that we use every single time we build a house, so it's really easy. And myself and one other builder, there's an A builder and a B builder, there's just 2 staff there and a team of 10 or more, and we can build a house in 2 days. I show you exactly how to use the power tools. Obviously, it's not America, and there's waivers and things like that are signed. But I was just down there building houses for homeless families, and I built 37 houses the summer that I was down there, or I guess the 7 months that I was down there. And then, while I was down there, I was surfing. This was a beach town, and preaching and just doing the missionary thing. And where my life started to change was the people I was around. It wasn't like a single conversation. It wasn't a Bible verse. It wasn't some moment. It was just immersion. It was just because I was in a new world. I was in a new environment. I turned my cell phone off when my girlfriend dumped me and I left America back. So she dumped me on Cinco de Mayo. I moved to Mexico June 1st. I gave it 3 weeks for her to change her mind because she was crazy. She didn't. And then 3 weeks later, I moved to Mexico. And so while I was down there, again, it was just this slow process, like peeling an onion of the depression that I still had from Steve and Matt, and in a different relationship that I was in, where not the one that dumped me on Cinco de Mayo, this one just left me for another dude. And so I was.
Do they ever hit you back now and they're like, they try to join Thrive or anything like that?
No. She's the one relationship that when it ended, I've never spoken to her since, ever, in any capacity. Not a DM, not a drunk text, nothing. It's complete silence.
Well, she's watching this now.
What's up?
I promise you, said shout out to you.
Yeah, what's up, Ashley? And so, Ashley, we'll say.
Ashley.
But so anyway, so bro, I'm down there and I'm heartbroken, still over my loss and through the tragedies. And so, and that's actually, I should give some credit. So there's a moral of the story. I was wondering if we would circle back. The girl that dumped me on Cinco de Mayo, I loved that one.
Yeah.
So I married her.
Okay.
I got her back.
Oh, that's
my
right.
wife.
You ended up getting her back. Okay, I remember this part. Okay, yeah.
And so the girl that dumped me, she dumped me because I didn't want to get married. So first time publicly sharing this, I had been married previously to Ashley.
Okay.
And she had an affair on me and left after 177 days of marriage. 5 months, 1 week, 6 days. Who's counting? And so she took off with her boyfriend that she had been dating the whole time we were engaged, and just forgot to mention that.
Yeah, for sure.
I would have called the wedding off personally, but I guess she wanted the free gifts. And so had the wedding, never had a marriage. So she took off. I lost Steve, I lost Matt. And so in my life, I was convinced that everyone I loved would either leave me or die.
Yeah.
And it was unhealthy, and I've completely processed through that. I'm totally healed now. But, as a 24-year-old, because I married her at 22, I was completely broken. And so here I am in a new relationship with Sonia, my now wife, and I told her on our very first date, I'll never marry you. And she's like, pump the brakes, date one, bro. And I'm like, I feel like it's important to be transparent that, like, you're a woman, and men and women have different priorities, and yours would be to someday possibly start a family with me. And I just want you to know I'm not the guy, but I'll be monogamous. I'll be loyal to you. I don't cheat. I will treat you with respect. I'll treat you like a queen. This was like at the end of my money in that first run. So it's like, I'll treat you like a queen. I'm just not going to ever marry you. So you need to know that. 2 years later was the Cinco de Mayo conversation, and she asked me, she's like, bro, will you ever get married? Not to me necessarily. She even said that. She's like, you don't even have to say you want to marry me. Just, is marriage on the table for you? I knew what she was fishing for. I knew that I wanted to get in there and have some tequila and tacos because it was Cinco de Mayo, but I knew that I respected her enough that I would give her the truth. So I looked her in the eyes. We were sitting in her car. She was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and I said, Sonia, no offense, I won't marry you. And you know why. And there was other loss that we haven't talked about too in my early 20s, where I was just convinced that if I loved you, you'd either leave me or die.
Right.
And so I told her that, and she knew that. She didn't take it personally. But I was so strict in that relationship, we weren't even allowed to say love you. Like, we had been dating now for almost 2 years, and we had never even used the L word yet. And this was the first time she dropped it. And she looked right, and it gets me emotional still, but she looked right in my face, and she said, well, here's the problem. I fell in love with you. And she's like, I love you so much. And she's like, if you can't love me the way that I deserve to be loved, you can't have me. Get out of my car. We weren't fighting, bro. Like, life was good. This came out of nowhere, at least in my opinion, but it had been bubbling up for her. And her justification was, I don't want to fall more in love with a man that's never going to be there for me in the long run, so you've got to go. So I get out of her car, she drove away out of my life, and then, as you know, I moved to Mexico. So the work, back to your question, that I was doing in Mexico was healing from that hole in my heart of losing so many people at such a young age, and several in a very tragic way. It wasn't just that people were walking out of my life, which that happened too. These were people that were tragically stolen from my life. And so I went down to Mexico, and like I said, man, it was just being in that environment of positivity and getting some perspective that I don't really have problems in America. Like when my internet's too slow to download a big file and I get all pissed off, I go down to Mexico to my orphanage and I see that there's real need in the world. That was my first experience of living in poverty. I'd done a few missions trips, like weekends trips here or there. I'd gone to Africa for 6 weeks actually with Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's church, and I did part of their peace church planting thing. But so I'd seen poverty, but I hadn't lived in it. And this was me now living in one of the poorest colonias of Mexico. And it's like third world conditions. Even though Mexico is a developing nation, it was still third world for me, at least in my world that I lived in. And all of that combined helped me realize that my problems weren't real problems, that I had a real story, and that it's not like losing Steve and Matt doesn't hurt and Ashley taking off and all that stuff. But the reality is I had a whole life ahead of me, and living like a victim wasn't serving me or serving anybody else anymore. And so that's when I made the decision, screw it. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to go back to America. They asked me to join them for staff for a minimum of a 2-year commitment because I was kicking ass down there. And I had this opportunity on the table. Go home and chase a girl who I haven't spoken to for 10 months. She could have a boyfriend by now. I have no idea. Go home and chase that. Or become a full-time missionary, raise support, and stay down here for a minimum of 2 years. And so I decided to go back to America. I sold everything I owned, a car that I had left at my parents' house. I sold a storage unit worth of belongings. I bought her a ring. I still hadn't spoken to her. I still didn't know she had a boyfriend.
You bought her a ring and you hadn't spoken to her. Yeah. Even in Mexico, you never tried to call her? Anything?
No. So we spoke briefly in Mexico. She actually came down and visited me because my mom was trying to salvage the relationship.
Yeah, okay.
Because mom knew that this was going to be her future daughter-in-law. And she came down and visited me. And it was on that visit that she and I had the adult breakup instead of the very sudden one in her car. She spent 3 days down in Mexico, and at my base, at that missionary base. She saw what I was doing. She came on a house build with me. She got immersed into my world and knew that wasn't her future. I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So if you want to marry me, if I can come around that turn someday, it'll be to do this stuff for the rest of my life. And she's like, I love it. This isn't my life. I want to live in America. I want to have a house. I want to have kids in private school. Like I want to do a regular thing. And so that was our goodbye. So I did talk to her once in the 10 months, but it was to finally like officially, hey, there's no reason to think about each other anymore. It's over. Yeah. And then another 4 months later was when I sold all my belongings, bought her a ring, planned a really cool engagement. And I didn't ask her to be my girlfriend. I had already dated her for 2 years. In Mexico, I knew with every ounce of my body that this was my wife, this is my girl, this is my ride or die. And so I just went all in and committed. Planned a really cool engagement, and she ended up saying not just yes, but heck yes. So we went from breaking up to engaged, and it was kind of funny. You know how Facebook says Cole's status is now engaged to Sonia or whatever? It was so funny when we updated our Facebook status. Everyone was like, what the hell? I thought you guys broke up a year ago. And it's like, yeah, we did, but now we're getting married in 4 months. So we got married 4.5 months later and got pregnant a month after that. So I went from single missionary in Mexico to married with a kid in 11 months.
There you go. See, Ashley, you fucked up.
Yeah,
all right, here we go. Now we go from this point. This is the part that's really interesting to me. So in my business, one of the things I try to do as far as networking is concerned, you see it with Dan Fleyshman. He does the Model Citizen Fund. I work with Babes in Toyland Charity. I also host Dan's parties at Model Citizen Fund. I do the red carpet for them. Cool. And I try to have as many events as I can be around something to do with philanthropy. We just did Scholastic Sports America. We did Babes and Ballers back in Los Angeles. We're trying to
raise
some
footage of you doing that. That was great.
Yeah, we try to do as many of those. And to me,
can I get an invite to Babes and Ballers?
I'm inviting you to everything.
Okay.
The 9th of February in Scottsdale, Babes and Ballers. We're doing one for the Super Bowl. If you happen to be around for Super Bowl, you know Cole Gordon, right? Do you know Cole?
No.
You don't know Cole? Oh,
no.
You should definitely meet Cole.
We're in the same circles, so his name comes up a lot. I know what he does, but no, we've never hung out.
Dude's a monster. $30 million a year doing sales stuff. He trains my sales team. The guys are the assassins. They're incredible.
Cool.
So coming to these events and using this networking ability. The other thing that I found is that when you build your business around charity, this is something I haven't heard you mention, but I wonder if you felt the same way. For us, with I do the Model Citizen Fund, which is I do Smash Global, which is an anti-bullying charity with Steve Orozco, and then I do Model Citizen Fund, which is for homeless people. Yep. Babes and Ballers is for homeless children, or underprivileged children, and domestic abuse, troops overseas, and animal rescue. When we do those things, what I found is that when people have super low empathy, like sociopaths, people who are extremely narcissists, they can't keep coming to these events. I found that what happens is after a while, they're like, I can't keep doing this because I'm not getting anything out of it.
Yeah,
and it's almost like a panhandler for gold. You start sifting out the bad ones, and you end up with this sort of society or this group of like-minded philanthropic people, which is how I feel whenever I go to Dan's events. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Totally.
So it's not just at the event we're giving back, but also these people that continue to do this are like, I'm going to give away shoes. I'm going to give away a house. That doesn't make any sense to me. But not only when you do it, are you giving back? Does it help you? But in addition, I also feel like you're around a bunch of altruistic human beings, and you're self-selecting for that type of individual.
Yeah, and I think, again, I participate. Good for you being so charitable and having so much affiliations with some really interesting sounding charities. Yeah. I've found that beyond the selfish ambition of just wanting to be philanthropic and generous. So I'm a Christian, and I believe that when I die, I'm going to be face to face with God and have to justify everything I did with the time I had on earth, the resources, the relationships, the moments, all of it. And so I want to be philanthropic because I feel it's part of my God calling on my life. But from a ROI standpoint, it's one of the best places to make relationships.
Yes.
People that have money go to charity events and who have good hearts oftentimes. Not always, as you said, there can be some douchebags that get in there for other reasons or whatever. I'm sure the babes and
they do,
dolls,
but they don't. The point is they don't stay. That's the point. The point I'm trying to make is after a while they're like, you want me to keep donating to this charity that I don't care about, and they just sort of like give up. And that's one of the things I love about it is that
filter.
We're just there in the end. If you want to dress me up like a clown and throw me in a fucking dunk tank and hit me in the face with a pie, as long as the kids get the money, I don't give a shit.
Yep.
I will do anything you need me to do in order for the kids to raise the money.
Right.
This is something you brought up before. It was like, don't you feel like it's weird? You did, I forgot the blonde lady that you did the interview with, but she was like, do you think it's strange when you post about you doing all this philanthropic work? And I'm like, no, because the kids got the money.
Yes.
This is the only thing. Well, for people who have an issue with it, you're complaining and you're not doing anything about it. You're literally making YouTube or Instagram comments. Meanwhile, we're raising money. And if every single person who gave us money to raise money for the Downtown Dog Rescue or Operation Blankets of Love, if every one of them was narcissistic, only did it for a tax write-off and only did it for their own personal reasons, I wouldn't care because the animals got the resources.
It's the net result.
That is the only thing I care about. I really don't even care where the money comes. I don't care if we do one for domestic abuse and everyone in there's a porn star who sells coke. I really don't give a shit as long as the people get the money. That's the only thing that matters. So that's one of the things I thought was interesting from your standpoint is like you're teaching people a way. It's so valuable to teach people an easy way to give back. That's why GoFundMe is so powerful because it's not just that you can give back, but it's a very easy one-click way for me to give back. So you can talk about what I thought was fantastic is the idea that your business now was funding your orphanages that you had back in Mexico.
Yeah. And so that's called a for-purpose business. That's something I've coined and I'm going to trademark is when you have the business, it's not just for profit. It's very lucrative. I mean, you can make as much stupid amounts of money as you want. So it's certainly not a nonprofit, but it's not a standard for-profit because it does more than just sell a product or a service to the world. And so a great example, probably the most popular would be Tom's Shoes. Up through 2019, for every pair of shoes they sold, they gave a pair away. They only changed their model because they were saturating markets with so much free shoes. They were disrupting the local ecosystem or economy, for other shoe vendors. But when they sold a pair of shoes, someone somewhere in a third world country received a pair of shoes. It wasn't just Blake Mikowski, the founder, becoming exorbitantly wealthy and then writing a check to charity, which is also cool. And I do that too. It's fine to just simply write checks.
Yeah, we'll take your money. Listen, we're not tripping on that. Like, if you don't want to sit there and live in Mexico, that's fine. If you want to just give us $1 million, well, nobody's going to complain.
Yeah, no, we'll take it. Especially, again, I'm about net result. I have a charity, and when people give to me and they go and brag about it online, people have asked me, like, does that bother you? And it's like, no. I was able to put a whole new well in because of that donation, or I was able to do an expansion in the orphanage because of that donation. I don't care if they're a douchebag about it online. That's between them and God, right? But so back to the for-purpose business, it's a business model where instead of just becoming wealthy and then giving to charity, while your business is running, it gives back in some capacity. Like Tom's Shoes. It didn't just Blake Mikowski became wealthy and wrote checks to the Red Cross. For every pair of shoes he sold, he gave a pair away. And so it's built into the business model. And so that's how I run my companies. And that's what we're creating this entire community at Thrive is all about, this philanthropic for-purpose movement where you can be unapologetically wealthy because by default, the more successful that you are and the more that you transact, the better off whatever the nonprofit or charity that you've attached to yourself does. And so you're incentivized. And again, I teach it to be a KPI. As you're looking at your metrics and your quarterly reviews, or however often you look at your metrics, you're going to see, what was our marketing cost? What was our burn? What was this? And what was our giving? How many lives did we impact last quarter? How many did we impact this quarter? And what do we want to do next quarter? So it's just a part of what your business does. And man, as I talk about this, it's clear that people are thirsty for this type of a business.
Yes.
They don't want to just make money to just buy crap for themselves. It gets old. And this might sound crazy to someone who's just getting started and doesn't have money yet. Maybe you're not there yet, but for people there yet emotionally. But for people that have made some money, or even those that are just getting started but want to make impact and not just dollars, running a for-purpose business is the way to do it. And you get so much extra branding. Like Tom's shoes, God bless them, they kind of sucked at their first version. They were like slippers. Yeah. But the reason that they blew up is because of how much free PR he got, because all these people were like, wait, you're doing what? So you sell a pair of shoes at Nordstrom's, and some kid in Africa has now got a pair of slippers and they don't have to be barefoot anymore? Will you come on my podcast? Will you come on our morning show? Will you come on our news network? And Blake got so much publicity that he's now worth $350 million. So there's a ton of consumer reports. You were talking about this on a different one of your episodes, that the younger generations are more touchy-feely philanthropic than even us. Whatever like a 16 to 30-year-old is, whatever that range is, they have like a higher expectation that businesses give back than ever in any previous generation before them. And so for anybody who's listening to this that's running a business, you should 100% consider creating a for-purpose element to your existing business, because it will not only help somebody somewhere, net benefit that we were talking about, someone's going to be receiving goods or services or just money from you. It's going to make you feel better. I mean, talk about having a deeper emotional connection to your business. It's going to make your employees feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So you have better employee retention and better employee selection if you're still, competitive with your rates. If I'm going to pay somebody what they'd be getting paid somewhere else, but working for me, people are winning versus working somewhere else, they're just creating revenue. There's all types of benefits of doing this. And then at the end of the day, you get more market share. And that's what I keep telling people is, because of the way that I run my businesses and the marketing messaging behind it, which we can talk about too, how to not look like a douchebag and talk about giving, I get more clients. More people come to my events and join my mastermind and become a part of my ecosystem because I'm for purpose. It's not just that I'm better than my competitor. I'm the only one doing what I'm doing. And a lot of people deeply resonate with this. And so my vision is to completely change commerce so that every single player, bro, it doesn't matter if you got a flat tire and you need a new tire, it doesn't matter if you want to go stay in a hotel here on the strip, that someone somewhere is a for-purpose player in every sector so that consumers have a choice. If I need to buy a pair of shoes, I can go buy a pair of Nikes where shareholders are happy, or I can buy a pair of Toms where someone wins, they're going to go for the Toms. Yeah. I want that to be everywhere. And so my romantic vision is that I'm going to build this for-purpose conversation up big enough that enough businesses do it, that it's just the way that business is done.
There's so much pressure on them to do it because everyone else is doing it also.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right now, the model is you have nonprofits that suck financially. They literally have no economic models. They're just completely dependent on charitable contributions and events and things like we've been talking about, but they're doing really meaningful work. Then you've got businesses who are obviously solving problems, or otherwise they wouldn't be in business, but they're really just about making money. And the businesses and the business owners that have the money then give it to the charity so that the charity can go and do the work. I just say, no offense to charities, let's just cut them out. Let's just let the businesses who have the resources, who have the workforce, who have the money, let's let them solve the world's problems. And that's like what Dan does. Dan is a for-purpose entrepreneur. Speaking back about Dan Fleyshman with the Model Citizen Fund, a portion of everything he does goes back to his own charity to then give 150 emergency items to homeless in each backpack that he gives out. And so, for anyone who's listening to this, I say give it a try.
Yeah. Ryan Stuman had a question for you, and it was, what does having a for-purpose business mean? You just answered that, which is great. Dan Fleyshman's question for you is, why is it so important for business people and entrepreneurs to, quote, make money matter? That's a quote that you have. Can you explain the concept of make money matter?
Yeah, make money matter is the definition of for purpose. So instead of just making money, you make it matter, right? Instead of just being a dick and just getting rich to just buy stuff to be a consumer, make money matter is what I just described with the for purpose business. You're making money, but it matters because it's directly connected to a charity or an aspect. Like, Let me give you another example. This is a dream of mine, and so I'm going to put it out here on your podcast first. The Rock and my wife are Instagram friends. You may or may not have heard at our last Thrive event, she got him to shoot us a video, and she spent 2 years creating absolute ridiculous videos on Reels and TikTok to try to get his attention. It worked. They had a phone call. They've exchanged 35 DMs, and he ended up creating this awesome video for us. Well, I have this romantic idea that I'm going to pitch him on Zoa to create a pink can where we launch it in October, and all the revenue from that pink can, this would be a good example for purpose for any of you that are listening to this right now. All the revenue from the pink can only would go to benefit breast cancer research. October's breast cancer research month. Everything goes pink. That's why the NFL wears pink gloves and pink socks and all that good stuff. We do it with The Rock. Now, mind you, he's got all of his other flavors that nothing changes. He still makes all the revenue from all his other SKUs. But this one product alone, he gives 100% of the profit to charity if he lets me do this for him, right? And so he's recuperating his cost. He's not taking a loss, but what would have been revenue goes to charity. Think about the difference that they can make. And now he's got a for-purpose brand where for every single can he sells, some woman somewhere is going to benefit because she's receiving money for breast cancer awareness or research or whatever it would be. And so I think that that's a good example. Where I stole that from is actually Stella. Have you ever drank a Stella before?
No.
Oh, well, you should.
Okay.
It's a beer. It's Stella Artois. And why Stella's cool is they're a for-purpose business.
Okay.
And they actually created a glass cup they call a chalice where it's branded Stella, and it's like $25. It's not cheap, but when you buy one, someone somewhere gets clean water for 5 years.
Okay, got it.
So they still make all their money from their ciders. They still make all their money from their beers and their brewery and their branding and all of their swag, and everything is unimpacted. But they on purpose created one product, this glass, to add to their product lineup that they on purpose recoup their costs but give 100% of the profits away. And so as people are buying their products, their revenue is unimpacted except for that one is a wash. But because of that one being a wash, I'm a full-blown evangelist. I'm talking about them on your freaking podcast right now. They don't pay me. They don't even send me free beer. That's what for purpose is, and that's what Make Money Matter is. Stella Artois said, how can we be impactful? So they partnered with water.org, and every single time you buy one of those chalices, like a Christmas stock, I bought like 20 of them this last Christmas because now 20 people are getting clean water somewhere. Incredible. And so back to Dan's question, that is what Make Money Matter is. You're not just making money, you're making it matter because someone's winning simultaneously.
Okay, you're a missionary. You decided, I want to be with my wife, and there's a gap between here and now you're a multimillionaire running Thrive. Can you fill in that gap there? What happens there?
Dude, God, I seriously, I came home from Mexico. I was broke. So don't forget, 2008 was the beginning of the recession, and I hemorrhaged through 2010. I had like $20,000 left to my name. I was asked out. Girlfriend dumps me, and I moved to Mexico with like 20 grand in my name. Now I was living in extreme poverty, so I was rich down there with 20,000. It would have lasted a few years probably at how I was living. I was just living off tacos and surfing all day. And so when it comes back to, what was your question?
The question was,
how did I make all my money? So when it comes back to moving back to America, I got distracted thinking about my good old days in Mexico. I had nothing. I had less than nothing. Had to move back into my parents' house because I just spent the last 7 months down in Mexico. And I went back to my real estate investment business. Now, mind you, the market had changed. It's now March 2011. So we weren't in a recession anymore, but things weren't good, right? I don't know if you remember 2011. It was like after a heavy rainstorm where the ground's still wet, but it's not actively raining. That was the economy. Like we were still reeling a little bit from the years previous, but there was opportunity. And so I said, Dad, let's fire back up the fix and flip business again. And I started a couple of other companies and ended up becoming a multimillionaire within 20 months, which is crazy because prior to going to Mexico, I had only made $1 million a year in my business, but personally I was bringing home maybe $500,000. Yeah. And then I go to Mexico, I get clear, I get my vision, I get my why, I become a for-purpose entrepreneur, I come back to America, and I become a multimillionaire. And I don't say that sound like a douche because it's you have a lot of multimillionaires, you're a multimillionaire, right? But it was the speed of which it happened that was why I knew that I was onto something with my for-purpose business model. And so anyway, started flipping houses again, started buying apartment buildings, started doing land deals, and have since diversified a bunch. With Dan, we own 23 restaurants now. And so I used to be a real estate investor. Now I'm just an investor. I have a multiple 7-figure crypto portfolio. But I buy assets now, different asset classes than what you do. I've been researching you. I'm incredibly impressed with your intellect. You're a quant. Like you can do things with your brain and mathematics. Like you do mental gymnastics for fun, I swear. And so I had none of that. I was just a regular guy. And so came back and built these businesses for purpose. And then that's what happened.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things I love that you talk about, so you made this money, you said that there's no such thing as a work-life balance. You'll have periods of time where it's just work and then periods of time where it's just play around. Can you talk about that? Because I know a lot of people focus on that, but whenever I had Nick Cosman or Cole Gordon on here, the first thing they said is like, no, in the beginning of my business, there was no life. It was just work.
Yeah, and this will lead into something I'm super passionate talking about right now, that what we're calling toxic hustle culture. So write that one down. Let's circle back to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, when it comes to work-life balance, I don't think it exists. I don't think that there's ever, like, because balance makes it sound like it's constant. To have a balance in your life is almost impossible because, at least in my experience, things come in waves. My family will need me a lot more in certain instances. I'm out here on a family trip. My daughter has a national cheer competition tomorrow. And so for the next 3 days, my family needed me and my business is taking a back seat. But then guess what's going to happen Monday morning when I fly back to California? My family will go back to school. My wife will get back into her routine and I'll go head down on my business. So it all comes in waves. But what I tell people that they need to do is audit their quality of life regularly. A lot of people build businesses for freedom and end up living their life around their business. Their business becomes their identity, it becomes their priority, and as they're living their life trying to have this freedom, inevitably they have just a new job working for themselves, running their companies, and it's just this never-ending cycle of never is enough. And I don't agree with that at all. And I think that it's important for people to just know, hey, listen, if you're trying to have a work-life balance as an entrepreneur, I can't speak to someone. I've been an entrepreneur now since 21 years old, so I have not had a job or a paycheck since the fire department when that car accident happened. I mean, my own paycheck from payroll, but you know what I'm saying. I've been self-employed. And so from a self-employed perspective, there's no such thing as having balance. What you need to do is, as I've said, audit what your weeks look like, retroactively look back and say, where have I been spending my time? Where have I been making my sacrifices? And then it's just about intuition of knowing when's enough is enough. I was just at Dan's event this last weekend and my family ended up needing me and I had to leave early. I was supposed to be there through Monday and I had to leave Sunday morning, and it was a little bit inconvenient because my family needed me and I had to make a decision. Am I going to tell my family, too bad, so sad, daddy's at work? Or am I going to tell Dan Fleyshman, hey bro, I got to go and I'm sorry. And in this case, I had to tell Dan, hey bro, I'm sorry, I got to go, and flew back from Tampa early because my family needed me. And so I think that part of why this is such a popular conversation in our circles is because nobody ever hits the bullseye.
Sure.
And I think that it's important to just know there is no perfect balance, but it's important to look at the sacrifices that you're making. And if you constantly are leaning into your business and your family is being the one that's on the back burner, I think you're way out of alignment. And in an audit, you would see that and be able to fix it.
That's incredible. Yeah. Can you talk about some other people that we talked about? Dan, Ryan Stewman. Can you talk about Tai Lopez and your affiliation with him? I've known Tai when Tai was just a normal dude, and Tai blew up afterwards. Yeah. Can you talk about your affiliation with him and some of the stuff that you've learned from him?
Sure. So back to why I think hosting events matters. I was throwing the very first Thrive here in Vegas, 2015, and
it was at the Hard Rock.
Yeah, no, the first one was at MGM. No, where was the first one? Mandalay Bay. The first one was at Mandalay, then Hard Rock, then MGM. We moved around the strip a bit. But so we're at Mandalay Bay. It's my very first event ever. We had 450 people show up to the very first Thrive, which was, I thought, impressive. And I had an inner team of people that were helping me curate speakers. We had Robert Herjavec from Shark Tank. We had Gary Vaynerchuk at the first one. And someone's like, you got to have Tai Lopez. And I was new to the entrepreneur circle, right? I had been making money as an entrepreneur, but I wasn't like listening to podcasts or in this little thing that you and I live in, whatever you would call this. And they're like, you should have Tai Lopez. I was like, who's that? And they showed me, and I was like, oh, this is the garage guy. The guy that's got his Lamborghini in his garage. Of course I know who Tai Lopez is. And I was like, well, does he have any good content? Long story short, we had a great dinner. I was impressed with, like you, he's a hyper-intellectual, super smart guy. He definitely has a different on-camera persona than he has off-camera.
Sure.
And I've told him this, so I'll say it publicly. I like his off-camera way better than the on-camera. Personally, he's caring, and we have deep and meaningful conversations. And so anyway, he spoke at the very first Thrive, and that's where we knew each other. He spoke for 5 Thrives in a row. My last 6th one was the first and only that he didn't speak at live. And it was just a scheduling conflict. And so that's where our friendship began. And then, he was a content creator and I was a real estate investor. He was not a real estate investor. He didn't know much about real estate investing at all. And so he said, hey, Cole, why don't we create for the first time ever a 50-50 partnership in a real estate course? what he had done historically is would ask you to film a little bit and her to film a little bit and this guy. And
like
he would,
what he did for SMM and 67 Steps. Yeah,
exactly. And so he would be in it and he would have some guest experts. Well, this was the first one where it was just me. He didn't say a single word other than the VSLs and the sales letters. He was not in the content at all. We built that thing up, made $100,000 its first hour, made $4 million its first 30 days. That's Ty's reach. That's his audience. And, making $4 million in our first 30 days didn't suck. Selling a $997 real estate course.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the beginning of it. And then we're just homies. I spoke at probably 30 of his various masterminds or big events, some of his big ones. And he spoke at, again, 5 Thrives in a row for me and a couple of my masterminds as well. And we've stayed in touch to this day. I was just hanging out with him actually in Vegas back in November.
Yeah, that's where I saw you guys. Yeah,
Yep.
Ty's great, man.
Yeah.
One of the things I think a lot of people don't realize, because now if you try to do the same thing, it probably wouldn't work. So that video has 71 million views. That's the one that goes, hey, you know what you need. By the way, Dan Fleyshman has his birthday party at Ty's house when Ty isn't there. Were you there? I don't know, the pillow fight. Do you remember the big pillow fight?
No, I didn't make that one.
It's a Model Citizen fun thing, and there was a huge pillow fight inside of a ring, and we got in there and just whacked the shit out of each other.
Yep.
I go around with a bunch of social media influencers, and we walk around here. It goes, you see these IG models? You see all this Lamborghini? You don't need this shit. What you need is knowledge. We did it in every room in his house. It was hilarious.
Gosh.
Dude, it was so fun. Because it was knowledge. You know? We did it in every room in his house. Really funny. But yeah, that was one of the things where Ty, what he did was he spent more money on YouTube ads than anyone I'd ever heard of, and he did it before anyone else.
Yes.
And he started getting insane ROI on there. And when people made fun of his ads, I don't know if you've seen this, he loved it. He was like, he kept promoting it. It was extra attention. It was so great. And he was the first person. So now, I started running ads on Facebook, and he's kind of like the model that I follow, right?
Yeah, sure.
How much money do we take in? No, we're not taking this
I can
as
see
profit.
that. I was on your Instagram. I see the girls and all this stuff.
And we crank this stuff out. And a lot of it I did because, so for Ty, it is the Lamborghini to sell you the books.
Yep.
He sells you what you want and then teaches what you need. For me, you see me with a bunch of girls. You'll notice in those videos, I'm never kissing the girls. I'm never touching them. They're always touching me. And we're in dresses, occasionally in bikinis or whatever.
It's a rough life, bro.
Yeah, but
tough.
But the thing is, I sell you what you want, and then you come into the program, and it's a leadership course, an entrepreneurship course, a mindset course. We go over evolutionary psychology, event planning, and how to network with people using social media. That's what the course is about. And so people come in there and they think it's this one thing, and then it's a completely different thing. There's no word. The word dating is nowhere in my course. It's the kind of stuff like that. But I learned that concept from Ty. Also Alex Becker's another guy. Sell them what they want and then teach them what they need. And then in the end, they stay with you for a long time because you end up improving them as a total person. I think the same thing you do with making money matter.
Totally. Tell them what they want to hear, then tell them what they need to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So my thing is you can't make money matter if you're not making money.
Yes.
And so I knew that I wanted to target entrepreneurs. And so it's about probably 70 to 80% of the content is tactical because I want people to feel like they're getting an ROI. I got to tell them what they want to hear. Here's how to make money.
Yeah.
But then what they need to hear is, hey, listen, you don't want to be rich and miserable. I believe that money can buy happiness. Well, then why doesn't everyone who has money have happiness? And it's because they're shopping in the wrong place, right? And so for people who are just getting started and want to do this, it's a matter of getting them through the door with the Lamborghinis or the girls, or in my case, it's my events where we have the best speaker lineup of anybody. So you're going to get the arguably best content by coming here. But then now that I've got you in your seat, I'm going to just suggest. I never presume to tell you what to do with your money, but I'm going to suggest that you go for purpose, and you're going to be more fulfilled. And everything I've already said, you're going to have better employee retention, better employee selection, better market share, and damn it, you're going to feel like a legend because when you're at your quarterly meetings and tables like this and everyone's sitting around and it's like, how many lives did we change or save or impact this quarter versus last? And it's like, oh, you saved 2,000 lives this last time, right? Like what I'm passionate about is human trafficking prevention. And so my orphanage down in Mexico is in a border town where these kids otherwise would be at high risk of being grabbed off the streets and brought into America, where Western men have these sexual appetites that are just despicable.
Yeah.
And these drug cartels in Mexico right now realize that they can sell cocaine once, but they can sell a 12-year-old 10 times a day.
Yeah.
And so the drug trafficking is largely become human trafficking through these tunnels at the border. And they're literally running out of little girls and little boys. And so that's why we started our orphanage, was to say, hey, these are the most at-risk children. They have no parents, and they're at the age that these disgusting men would want them. So let's put a roof over their heads and keep them safe. And again, for me, making tens of millions of dollars is awesome. I love the financial freedom that my family and I get to enjoy. But at the end of the day, knowing that I'm saving little girls and little boys from being stolen into sex slavery is what I am most proud of, and it's what I want to talk about the most. And so back to your point of tell them what they want to hear and then tell them what they need to hear. For me to get people through the door, it's, hey, I'm going to tell you how to make money and get rich.
Yeah.
And now that you're here, maybe you shouldn't be a dick about being rich. Maybe you should be for purpose.
For sure.
And I want to give you every resource I can, because if your business is for purpose, why wouldn't I want to see your business do better? Because now someone somewhere is winning more.
Ryan Stewman with the watches. Yeah. Wes Watson with all those cars,
yeah.
Brad with that Ferrari and the cigar. Like, everyone had this thing that would get your attention. It would hit your monkey brain real quick, your limbic system, and then it would cause you to pay attention to what they're saying. And then accidentally you become a better person. Totally. Accidentally we brought you to this charity event. You wanted to come to the charity event because you wanted to network with so-and-so, but in the end you come to the realization, hey, human trafficking is a big problem, and let's do something to try to fix that. So I thought that was really terrific, man.
You know, one thing that you touched on that we didn't really talk on is what it looks like from a public perspective of being for purpose and people thinking you're a douchebag or whatever. First of all, doesn't matter what you do. You stand in front of a Lamborghini in your garage, Tai Lopez is called a douchebag.
Yeah.
With all the girls' videos, I'm sure someone calls you a douchebag in your DM. Exactly. Yes. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you're going to be called a douchebag, might as well be around giving, right? Like, you're going to call me a douchebag for a Lambo, or because I have an orphanage, I'll take the orphanage. But at the end of the day, here's how I look at that. A for-purpose business is a business. It's not an individual. So when I talk about the generosity that my businesses show, I never talk about what my wife and I do personally. My wife and I are very generous people also, but the Bible says, give with your right hand without the left hand knowing. I don't want to sit and boast about all of the charitable contributions that my wife and I are making to various charities or individuals. My businesses publicly give back because it's what my businesses do. It's their model. And so for anybody who's listening to this and is like, Cole, man, I would love to do what you're talking about, but the reality is I would feel so icky being public about it. It is not about you. It's about your business.
Yes.
Like, my business functionally does this and simultaneously gives back in this way. And then the business pays you what's left after it's done its charitable stuff. And then what you do with your money is completely your own. So I would just say that, you know, how does it look? I too would think that it would feel kind of douchey to personally be like, hey, I just funded somebody's Christmas this year because I'm rich and they were broke, and this is why you need to be rich too. But that would be arrogance.
Sure.
I would still encourage people, if that's who they are, to still do it, because somebody's still going to win.
Talk about the charity then.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Don't talk about how much money you gave. Just use your platform in order to give more light to the fact that there's actually somebody out there trying. The Shade Tree is this it's a domestic abuse shelter up in North Vegas. A lot of people in the city don't know about it. Yeah. If you want to just go up there and donate, you can. Not only do they need money for the women that are victims of domestic abuse, they also need money for the kennel. They have to take the dogs in there because a lot of times abusers will take it out on the animals that stay there. So there's also this place called Noah's Place where all the dogs from all the families that are up there, and the children have to go to school. They have private tutoring that they have up there too. You want a charity to give money to? Go up to North Vegas and help them out. But a lot of people don't know about them. I'm not going to tell people how much money I gave to them, but I will tell you about the Shade Tree and how you need to go up there and help those people.
Exactly.
So that's exactly what you could do with that idea. Here's another thing. We don't have a ton of time left, but I want to go over a couple of things. Number one, progress, not perfect. I love this idea because I get a lot of people hit me up about starting a podcast. And one of the things I tell them is whatever you can replicate the easiest. Sticky Paws has given me this incredible platform. I'm a partner here with these guys, and they give me this platform for I can consistently over and over again do these shows without doing multiple edits and having all these cool graphics. I try to keep it as simple as possible, and the reason why is so I can do this 100 times.
Yeah.
When people make episode 1 and they spent $10,000 to make episode 1 with all this stuff, that makes it not repeatable. If it took 27 hours of your time to make one episode, I like the live edit. Live streams are super great because you do the live stream, you're done. Yep. You got your super chat. Can you talk about progress, not perfect? Because that's what I when I see that, you need to just keep going forward and not worry about everything being perfect.
Yeah, and well, I mean, I think you just did a good job of explaining it, and it's not super complicated, but progress not perfect is important. Perfectionism kills all progress, literally, and I don't think that as imperfect people will ever create a perfect anything. That's like you ask an artist who's painting on canvas, how do you know when it's the final stroke? How do you know when it's done?
Yeah.
And even some artists, they're never satisfied. And so I would just say, when anybody who's struggling getting started or who is stuck in the perfection mode, progress not perfect is a metric. It's a measurement for moving forward. And so I use running as an example. When I am just getting started running, I'm a runner now, but when I was first getting started, man, I couldn't even do a mile, and it took me like 15 minutes to get one.
Yeah.
Right? Now I can run, a bunch of miles at a very quick time. But for me, progress not perfect would be days where I left it all on the field. I ran my ass off. I knew that I had nothing left in the tank. I gave it my best, but it wasn't my fastest time. But I know that I'm still progressing as a runner. I knew that I was still burning the calories and getting the physical results that I wanted, because I'm not running because I'm crazy. I'm running because I want abs, right? But the reality is I knew that my time wasn't faster, so it wasn't perfect. It wasn't incrementally getting faster. It was, this is a hypothetical, but I knew that I worked my ass off and that there was nothing left that I could give in that jog. That is progress. Yeah. And so I think it's just important for people to have a bigger picture and a longer timeline of whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, and don't get stuck in perfectionism. I heard Facebook was the one that made it famous. Done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
I guess they had that written on their wall, and a bunch of people that would visit would talk about it.
It was Jobs. So
Jobs say Apple.
Jobs say true artist ship. And that's where that thing came from. Because originally Steve Jobs wanted everything to be perfect. And he got super frustrated because some of the designs were coming up. So he came up with the term true artists ship. Meaning you have to ship the actual product, and then Facebook took that and made that logo from there.
Yeah, so done is better than perfect, and in this case, progress, not perfection, is just, again, you did a great job using your show as an example. You just got to get it out there, you got to get it done, and if you sit spending 28 hours on one episode, you will never, ever, ever get it done, and then that's a fail.
That is, yeah.
And so...
Well, one of the things for any physics nerds that are out there, the orbital velocity for planet Earth is like 5 miles a second, or you have to go 11 miles a second in order to escape the Earth's gravity to get to the moon. And people ask, so what's how fast do you have to take off in order to get to orbit? And the answer is you just have to keep going faster. Yeah. You just have to keep going fast. The answer is, as long as you continue to accelerate, it doesn't make any difference.
How do you know all this stuff that you just randomly pull out of thin air?
I studied astrophysics in college.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Yeah. So here's the next thing. Your mentors. You talk about Than Merrill. You talk about Henry Ford. Can you, for somebody who's looking for mentors, one of the things I love is that a lot of my mentors have passed away. They're dead. Yeah. I love Benjamin Franklin. I love reading about Steve Jobs. Can you talk about how you can find mentors that are real, some that are virtual, and all the free stuff you can learn from people? For those of you who don't want to do the $100,000 mastermind with Dan Fleyshman, there's a bunch of free content that's out there also.
Totally. And so, again, good frame. And so when it comes to mentorship, a lot of people think it's this formal agreement, like they've hired you, Michael, they're paying you, you're their coach, and you're in some contractual agreement, which is a form of mentorship. And it's a great form of mentorship. If you're in the position to do so, I recommend it. But I've been mentored, as you just mentioned. One of my greatest mentors was Henry Ford in the way that he automated and systemized his business. I want a repeatable, duplicatable result in my business. And he was the first in America to use the assembly line for the car manufacturing. And, one of the things I love about Henry Ford is I disagree with a lot of his personal beliefs. He was a bit of an anti-Semite, if people really do some digging on him. Yeah. I would disagree. If he and I were on a podcast together, we might disagree with most things. Yeah. But there were a few things that he did professionally that I have implemented in my own business that has made me gazillions of dollars. And so Henry Ford died like 50 years before I was born or something like that. And so I just like to expand people's minds on the opportunity of who may be a mentor to them. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to go pay Tony Robbins $1 million a year to have Tony Robbins mentor you. Everything he says to any of his clients is probably on YouTube for free. You can spend some time on YouTube, some time on podcasts, and now free content is everywhere. There is no excuse for people to not be mentored. And so while I'm a huge fan of the formal mentorship, like your group and how you help guys and how I do it through my world as well, that's important, but it's not necessarily possible for every single person. They don't have the financial means, or somebody who lives in China might not be able to get a hold of me and come to Thrive. It's just geographically limited, whatever their limitations are. And I would just encourage people to, again, expand your mind a little bit on what mentorship is, because there are absolute legends and absolute geniuses that, like yourself, create free content for the world to consume, and that is another form of mentorship. And so, again, one of my greatest mentors is Than Merrill. I actually worked for Than. I became a professional speaker, and I was flipping a bunch of houses, and I actually bought his educational course that I don't even think exists anymore, called Mastery. I did it. I was successful. He's like, hey, do you want to get on stage and talk to people about it? And so he mentored me through proximity. I never asked him to be a mentor. He and I never ever signed some formal agreement, but I worked so closely in his inner circle that I was able to see his moves and emulate a lot of what I saw him doing.
Yeah.
And so that's another form of mentorship. So we've covered 3 now. There's the formal, engaged, I'm going to sign a contract and pay you. There's the consuming free content, but then there's mentorship through proximity.
Yeah.
And that's where like a lot of interns come. Why do you think people work for free as an intern? Some people need college credits or whatever it is, but a lot of times they just want that proximity to learn.
Yeah.
A lot of craft or tradesmen do that, the apprenticeship, mentorship. And so that's another option is if somebody is a huge fan of yours and wants to get into your sphere but can't quite afford you yet, there are things that people can do for you to help you.
It would take you over a year to watch all the shit that I put out.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. Absolutely.
And so, but everyone needs a mentor.
For sure.
Everyone has to grow.
So going back to what you said before, what's really great. So I don't have a formal like discussion with Dan Fleyshman every day about networking. I just follow what he does.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with Stuman. Same thing.
R&D, rip off and duplicate.
For sure. Rip off and duplicate. If you look at my reels and you look at Brad Lee's reels, it's not an accident that they look similar. We copied what he did. And I called him one day and said, thank you. But when we did our first 100K month, I was like, dude, thank you. We did 400K month. And I was like, looking at what Wes Watson was doing. I was like, we're copying what Wes Watson is doing. That's the whole thing. So these people are informally mentoring.
No, they probably just copied someone else too.
Exactly.
It's just the way it works.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like when you find mentors, the thing is, I know that Brad is doing better than me as far as this whole thing is. So I'm gonna listen to what Brad's doing.
Yeah.
So that's the piece of advice I want to give people.
That's an important part of the advice.
Yeah. You guys have to realize if you love Tony Robbins, have you read every single one of his books? Because you probably have it. You get through to listen to him on audiobook, and then every single interview he's ever done, I bet you it would take you 6 months to go through all those before you try to pay him $100,000 to have dinner. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And so that's what I think is a really great piece of advice.
I think what you just said is also important too. You should only take advice from people who are where you want to be in the subject that you're learning from. Yeah. And so I'm okay learning from someone who's had 15 divorces, not about marriage advice. If they're a multimillionaire, I'm going to learn from financial advice.
Exactly the same thing. Patrick Bet-David talked about this this thing where he isolates when somebody is good at one thing and not good at another thing. I have a lot of friends of mine who are incredibly successful, and I'm like, man, and I tell my partners, let's emulate that without the fucking divorce and the cocaine addiction and the excess gambling. Let's just do the making money part. Let's just do that part.
Back to the Henry Ford thing. Yeah. Again, I can disagree with his thoughts on certain minority groups, etc. But I can learn a ton from how he operated his business. And so I think it's important that people stop taking financial advice from broke people.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I'll tell somebody something and they're like, oh, well, my uncle says, well, what's your uncle do? Oh, he lives on my couch. He's unemployed chronically. Yeah, exactly. It's like, cool. Well, then you're going to end up where your uncle is.
Constantly. Okay, so now here's another thing, investment advice that you give about people taking the money that they make and then using it to buy assets. You said the first time you blew a lot of money, and then later on you figured out, I need to buy this fourplex, I need to buy this. Can you go into that?
Totally.
Assets that give you money?
So we already covered how I had a $50,000 a month nut when I was 23 years old, all that was no passive income of any kind, so I had to work my ass off every month to continue to pay for my junk. Well, you should never take your earned money to buy junk. Your earned money should be used to pay your bills and buy assets. And then your assets, if you've done it right, will cash flow. And then the cash flow from your assets is screw off money, do whatever you want with. And so for me personally, I did it wrong the first time, and I got myself into an overhead, I guess you would call it, not debt, but an overhead that required me a lot of activity. I would have to work my ass off every single month to just pay my bills. And by the time taxes and bills were paid, I had nothing left. And then once the income was gone, I was freaking screwed. Had I done it the other way, where I went and bought a bunch of assets instead, like you said, fourplexes or 400-unit apartment buildings nowadays, and got some of this better cash-producing assets, all of the cash flow from those will buy you boats, they'll buy you cars, they'll buy you jets, they'll buy all of that. Grant Cardone talks a lot about this. And that's the model I'm living now. And guess what? You can't take my cash flow away from me. We've got great assets.
Even in a recession, you can't take the cash flow away from you. Yes.
Nope. Yeah. You can't take it away. It can change. Obviously, in absolute dire economies, you can lower rents, etc.
Sure.
But I live within my means, and that's important too. My lifestyle is pretty casual for the type of money that I make. My financial peers have Rolls Royces and private jets and all kinds of things where I flew over here commercial very frustratingly this morning.
Yeah.
Made me second guess not flying private. But so I live within my means, and my fun money comes from my assets. And that's, if you guys that are listening to this, listen to that, you will never go broke.
Yeah. So speaking of mentors that we had before, Brad Lee is somebody that I look up to. Yeah. And he had a question for you, and we may have to cut this out, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
It probably has to do with my penis. Yeah, so it's coming from Brad Lee. It's got to do with my
Brad
junk.
asks, why penis jokes are your favorite, and how did the extension surgery go?
Yeah. Well, that would be the perfect question from Brad Lee. I always ask him the same question. Why is he so obsessed with my junk? Before you even asked the question, I already knew. But what was it? How does that? What was the actual question?
He goes, why are penis jokes your favorite, and how did the extension surgery go?
Why are penis jokes my favorite, and how did the extension go? Thanks, Brad. Extension went great. Like, what do you say to someone like Brad who's just so obsessed with other men's junk?
Oh man, dude!
So tell him it's going to tickle the back of his throat just like he loves it.
There we go.
Because the extension's done now. Thanks, Brad. I love telling the jokes because I love telling jokes about your favorite body part.
There we go. Awesome, man. And we are demonetized. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Here we go. The thing is, I thought it was awesome, so I went back and watched your TEDx talk.
Where are you getting these questions, by the way? Are you
the day before I do the interview, I always ask all of your friends questions, and then they send them in.
Oh, dude, you are thorough. I was like, where did Stuman come from? And Dan, and now we got Bradley asking dick jokes again.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other one I thought was interesting is you did a TEDx talk where you actually say, and we're going to go back, it's going to go back to the same thing.
Yeah.
The TEDx talk was how money can buy you happiness.
Yeah.
Can you go into that?
Yeah, well, it's more of what we've been talking about. So people say money can't buy happiness because they go and they buy a brand new Ferrari, and it's exciting and it's fun, but after a few months, it's just another material object, right? Or they buy the new house, or they buy whatever that they're buying, and it's always momentary happiness. You see really wealthy people who are miserable. You see people who are famous and wealthy who are miserable. And so there's this misbelief that, well, if really wealthy, really famous people are miserable, and if I bought this thing that only sort of made me happy for a short period of time, well, then obviously money can't buy happiness, right? That's this misbelief. And the reality is, no. Try feeding starving children.
Yeah.
When I was living in Mexico, I started an orphanage, and we've talked a little bit about that. But one of the things that I did while I was building houses for homeless families was I started this orphanage with a family that lives there permanently. And I'll tell you what, I did their grocery shopping 2 or 3 days a week. We don't have like refrigerators, and I mean, we're talking third world conditions. So you need a grocery shop like for what you need for the day. And so I'd be bringing food to them 2 or 3 times a week, every single week, off of what little savings I had left from my good old days. And dude, this stuff brings me to tears. When you're handing starving children food and you see them just start devouring it like right away, they don't even wait to cook it. They're like eating top ramen dry right out of the bag. And because I wasn't buying them filet mignon, I was broke myself. But so you can absolutely buy happiness. And what I tell people to do is try it. Don't write a check to the Red Cross. I mean, do it if you want, but there's no emotional attachment to that. Giving money's too easy. It's too easy to just give money to a charity. Go volunteer at the charity. Go see the impact. Buy a homeless person lunch and sit down and eat their lunch with them. Like, buy yourself go to a fast food restaurant. We got In-N-Out right here. Get an In-N-Out burger. Buy one for a homeless guy and sit down and eat with them.
Yeah.
And have a conversation with them like you and I are having right now. I do that a lot in San Diego. My wife and I will go down there and we skateboard around and we eat with all the homeless people that were down there. And I can't tell you how many of them say, this is the first time I've had a conversation in months. People just yell at me and tell me to leave, but they won't sit down and actually engage with me.
Yeah.
And if you use your money to have an experience like that, I guarantee you're going to be happier, or you're absolutely broken and need a psychiatrist or some sort of help, because it's the way that we're wired. Tony Robbins says the secret to living is giving. And every human being, no matter how narcissistic you are, has a part of you that will feel good about knowing that you personally impacted somebody else. And so what I tell people again, and I shouldn't say don't give the Red Cross. If that's what you do, do it. Obviously, continue to give to the charities that you support. But again, the emotional experience of doing the work with your money, buying a homeless person food, and then sitting down and eating with them and having a 20-minute conversation and then moving on about your day will completely change your life forever.
By the way, if you guys want to do that here in Las Vegas, you guys can check out 3square.org, and they have several food pantries all over Las Vegas. And those food pantries, you can actually meet several homeless people, and they'll, if you want to have a conversation with them, but you actually, with your own hands, are going to soup kitchens and food pantries and helping people out. 3square.org was actually partially started by Conrad Hilton, the great grandfather of Paris Hilton, who started the Hilton hotel brand.
Cool.
The last question I want to ask you about is the concept of loss and losing, and how that can build you up. You talked about participation trophies being a problem for people because they don't ever experience the idea of losing, and how that helps you in the long run as far as building a business and becoming a more durable, anti-fragile person.
Yeah, so loss, it sucks. It doesn't feel good, but it helps mold you, resiliency. And I went through a lot in my 20s, and I can say with certainty that it's what made me in my 30s become the man that I am today. And I would totally change it. People are like, oh, I wouldn't change a thing. I would take Steve and Matt back in a second, right? I'd let Ashley leave, but I'd take Steve and Matt back. I got a massive upgrade with my current wife, so I'm happy. That one.
Shout out to Ashley one more time.
Yeah,
shout out to you, Ashley. Hit me up a DM. We're gonna have you on here sometime.
Oh, that would be great. I'd love to see that. Yeah. But so anyway, going through the loss and then the attitude that you choose to have about the loss. Because if you're a poor sport or a loser about it, then loss will be really counterproductive for you. But if you have the foresight of seeing that there's a silver lining on every cloud, and losing Steve and Matt sucked, but it's what gave me the motivation to change my life forever, and to all the for purpose and all that is in honor of them. I didn't say this part on your show, but I had a really dark moment at the last time I took the pills. I had just taken 4 or 5 morphines. Like, I was supposed to take 1 every 8 hours. I just took 4 or 5 of these bad boys, and I had my bottle of tequila that I was just getting ready to chase it, and that's when I had my aha moment. And I just started talking out loud I was at my parents' house, and I was just yelling at God, and I was like, how could you let Steve and Matt die and all that? And then that was when I realized in that moment, by being a victim and by letting this loss destroy me, I'm literally going to accidentally kill myself. I just took more pills than I'd ever taken before.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this loss and I'm going to use it to motivate me. I'm going to take all that same amount of emotional energy that's coming through me in the feeling of grief and depression, and I'm going to use that emotion to be motivation to go out there and to do bigger and better things. And I was able to pivot the worst tragedy that anyone would ever have to go through. Again, near-death experiences and others not surviving. I'm the only survivor between the 3 of us, and was able to use that as motivation. And so that's why I think loss is important. As I shared, my daughter has cheer tomorrow, and they keep winning first place. And I literally told my wife, I hope they get their asses kicked. And my wife's like, how could you say that? It's like, because my daughter doesn't know what it feels like to be disappointed. She's so talented, and she's on such a talented cheer team. They keep getting first place everywhere they go. She doesn't know what it's like to even feel disappointed. But I think there's a lot of character building in knowing how to deal with loss, whether it be physical loss of a human life or just losing, at a cheer competition or whatever it is. And I think that people should, if you're not losing, you're not trying hard enough. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're playing it way too safe. And I think that there's valuable lessons in all of loss.
Whenever I see somebody in their early 20s and I can see that spark in them and they've gone through some tragic loss, I'm almost jealous of them.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, you're about to go through Ulysses' Odyssey right now. You're about to go through this Odyssey, this journey where you're going to grow so much, and you're never going to be able to go through it again. You're never going to be able to go through and learn these lessons. You're never going to be able to read the classics again after you read them the first time.
Totally.
So a lot of times I see these guys and I'm like, man, I'm so excited for you. In my program, one of the things I say in the first thing is like, this is the program I wish someone had given me 25 years ago when I started on this journey. And so this is what I want to give to you. So yeah, man, that journey that starts, and a big part of that journey is loss. A lot of times when I give people, there's a book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I give that book to people and I get 2 responses. People who have gone through incredible suffering, all are like, this is the greatest book I've ever read in my life. People who haven't, they're always like, I don't understand any of this. It makes no sense. I'm like, you haven't suffered enough. You know, for some people, they just haven't got to that point yet.
There's something to be said about that. My wife's an immigrant, and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about the immigrant advantage, that coming here and not speaking the language and having nothing, and the grit and that you have to, the resolve that you have to make it being successful. He says that is a huge advantage for him. For me, it's the experience I've gone through. But what are your thoughts on people that have like these super easy lives? Do you think that they're almost disadvantaged because they haven't had to hit some massive obstacle?
So you had a conversation with Brad and Dan about people leaving their children a lot of money, right? You remember talking about that?
Yep.
And there's by the way, when you said that, the first thing that came to me is The Millionaire Next Door. I don't know if you ever read that book, but it goes over how most millionaires leave money to their children so that they don't become despots like what happens before. There has to be, it's not just suffering, but it's a certain level of accountability. Does that make sense?
Sure.
That's why I think Marine Corps boot camp can help with a lot of people. A lot of this stuff, like it is a certain level of suffering where they come out the other side and they understand. When there's a lot of times when you see and I'll just use an example, a kid who knew he was going to be a first-round draft pick when he was in high school, like a basketball player, or an extremely beautiful woman who's been extremely beautiful since she was in junior high. A lot of times once the career ends or once she's not pretty anymore, it hits them so hard.
Yeah.
It's the 90s movie star who all of a sudden isn't famous anymore.
They're losing their identity.
And he's at the Playboy Mansion hitting on girls and nobody wants to talk to him. It's that guy. And the thing is, you have to go through some level of you don't have to, but it's most likely that you have to go through some level of suffering, and it's not some sort of energy thing. I think there's neurochemical things. You should read the book, The Winner Effect. There's neurochemical things that happen in the brain when you come from that place. I have a friend of mine, I don't know if you know Jeff Franklin. He's the guy who created Full House. and he also created the show Fuller House. Jeff used to be poor. Now Jeff's worth several $100 million. Sure. But when you talk to Jeff, you can tell he used to be poor, and he has gratitude for every single thing, and everything he would give away for he has 2 golden retrievers that he treats like his children, and he loves the shit out of them, like in his family. When you see somebody like that, you can tell Jeff. When I talk to other people who were born rich, it's just very different conversation. 100%. But with Jeff, I can tell Jeff used to be some struggling dude in Hollywood trying to make it, and then he did make it. And so I do think that it is really important that there is some level of strife or suffering. That's what the book Anti-Fragile is about by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, becoming an anti-fragile type of person. That's why I trade options, to be honest with you, is because when things go crazy, I actually make more money. Yeah. So that's kind of the thing. Embrace the chaos.
Yeah, 100%.
Where can we find you, man? Where can we find you online? And can you tell us about the course that are you teaching a course now?
Yeah, so you can find me at Cole Hatter on all my socials, just my name, no underscores, no dots, at Cole Hatter. And the course, you can learn about it. What is it? ThriveGiveBig.com.
Thrive, Give Big. Do you have another Thrive coming up anytime soon?
Not now, but it'll be probably fall 2024.
Beautiful,
or 2023, man. Probably fall this year.
You can do it here?
Yeah, in Vegas.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. I'm super excited, man.
Maybe we'll have you speak at it.
Yeah, I would love to speak at it, man. That would be incredible, man. And by the way, thank you to Dan Fleyshman, because Dan was kind of the gateway for me to be a bunch of these different people.
Yeah.
And it's been very huge. And also, when you have these people on your podcast, or you do them, you probably notice you'll get a connection to the next person, the next person, the next person, and it brings you to the person that you're looking for to help you build your business or to find the happiness that you want. As far as a connector is concerned, most of my guy friends, they meet their girlfriends through me. And a lot of my friends get their jobs through me. That's what I try to teach people to do, is to be a connector. And Dan Fleyshman is sort of an example for me to be that kind of person. So shout out to him again for doing that. Hey, man, thank you so much for coming on. I know it was the last second, but I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
This is a really great time. Hopefully we'll have you on again. We'll do a longer one. Maybe we'll do a panel with a bunch of us.
That'd be cool.
I have like a dream panel of us.
Yeah, sorry I was so late today with my freaking flight. And we had to cut this one short.
It's all good, man. It's perfect. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. We have several events coming up, man. I'm going to be posting about later, several charity events. We're going to do Babes and Baller in Scottsdale. We got Babes in Toyland in Miami coming up. We got Babes in Toyland. We're doing an animal rescue one in March that we're going to be doing. I'm going to be doing a bunch of stuff like that. Anytime Dan Fleyshman has a Model Citizen Fund event, I always try to step up for that. And I'm going to try to come to Thrive. If next time you guys do that here, it's going to be pretty cool. If you guys are interested in that or any other stuff, you guys can check me out on Instagram at Michael Sartain. And we will see you all next week.